So, dear ladies and gentlemen, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, gentili signore, egregi signori, it's a pleasure to open the Galileo Galilei Science and Space Festival 2023, which this year reaches its third edition and starts today from the ethereal spaces of the web with a unique interview with Nobel Prize winner Professor Giorgio Parisi. The festival will develop in the next 4 days between Frankfurt and Darmstadt with in-presence events and with a dense program rich of diverse themes and distinguished speakers. My name is Luciano Rezzolla, and before giving the word to the Consul General Andrea Samà, I would like to remark that this meeting with Professor Parisi has been organized so as to be a dialogue. And as always in a dialogue, we need multiple voices. So there's going to be the interviews that Professor Toia and myself will ask Professor Parisi, but also we would like to hear from you and all of your questions. These will be collected through the question and answer window that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And of course, we will do our best to select and bring up the most interesting one. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the word to the General Consul, Andrea Samà, who will introduce the festival.
Thank you very much, Professor Rezzolla. I hope you hear me well. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Giorgio Parisi for being our special guest today. It is really an honor and a pleasure to me and to all of us to have you as a great scientist and a Nobel Prize winner, our guest today in this opening seminar of the Galileo Galilei Science and Technology Festival. As Professor Rezzolla said, it's the third year in a row that the Italian General Consulate organizes this festival. Why? Because we think that science is fundamental to our life, and the promotion of scientific culture is very important and of relevance to everybody of us. And secondly, scientific diplomacy is a very important part of the diplomatic effort and foreign policy of Italy. We strive to promote scientific cooperation and dialogue with other nations, in this case with Germany, and we also try to promote Italy as a great country of scientific and technological research. Just allow me to remind that Italy has presented a candidature of the location of SOS e Natos in Sardinia to host the new Einstein telescope. After having said this, I would like to thank all the partners who co-organized this festival. In particular today, I would like to thank the two moderators, Professor Rezzolla and Professor Toia, grazie mille. I would like to thank the Goethe University of Frankfurt, the European Space Agency ESOC in Darmstadt, EUMETSAT in Darmstadt, the Research Center GSI Fair in Darmstadt, and also Rizzoli Libri. I wish all of you a nice evening, a nice seminar with us today, and I invite all of you also to attend the following events of this festival in the coming days until Saturday. Grazie mille.
Good evening, everybody. It's now my turn to introduce myself. My name is Alberica Toia, and it's more than an honor to interview our guest of tonight. When you interview a Nobel Prize winner, you feel like a child who has the chance to pass to Lionel Messi the ball for Physics Nobel Prize in Physics 2021 for groundbreaking contribution to theory of complex system, specifically for the discovery of the interplay of disorder and fluctuations in physical systems from atomic to planetary scales. When you interview a Nobel Prize winner, you must keep in mind that he's a genius, but normal. He received his degree from University of Roma La Sapienza in 1970 under the supervision of Nicola Cabibbo, a giant of Italian theoretical physics, with a thesis on the Higgs boson. He was a researcher at Laboratori Nazionali di Frascati, Columbia University, Institut des Hautes Études Scientifiques, École Normale Supérieure, before becoming full professor at University of Roma Tor Vergata when the university just opened, and finally at La Sapienza. He has been president of Accademia dei Lincei. His research activities have focused on particle physics, phase transition theory, and statistical mechanics, mathematical physics, disordered system, and the design and construction of parallel computers. In particular, he has developed a theory of complex systems that can be applied to biological systems and genetics. When you interview a Nobel Prize winner, you must keep in mind that he is normal, but a genius. The list of honor and awards could fill an entire book. Feltrinelli Prize, Boltzmann Medal, Dirac Medal, Enrico Fermi Prize, Nonino Prize, Max Planck Medal, Nature Awards for Mentoring in Science, High Energy and Particle Physics Prize, various honorary doctorate in science up to Nobel Prize in Physics, but also Cavaliere di Gran Croce all'Ordine del Merito della Repubblica Italiana. Tonight, Giorgio Parisi is here to show us his normality and originality, to give us a glimpse of his cosmic curiosity, his holistic view of life, which allows him to use methods of particle physics to explain the flights of birds, to teach us the art of doubt and the virtue of humility, which, together with the drive of motivation and the strength of perseverance, allow him to climb never-ending steps and turning on lights in our darkness. Perhaps not everyone knows that the second passion of Giorgio Parisi is dancing, Latin American, Greek dance, to which he has recently added forró, a Brazilian couple dance. It's another way, perhaps more fun, to try to bring order to the chaos of reality. And now I would start from a theme that appears in many pages of your book. It is the theme of freedom. You express gratitude for the great freedom that you benefit through your entire scientific career and also your personal life, the freedom to choose and even to be able to move between different topics. Professor Parisi, what role did freedom play and how important is it to defend this freedom?
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to thank everybody for the speakers for this very nice introduction and for this nice question. I think that academic freedom in general is something that is extremely important. It is something that has been very stressed, especially from the French Revolution. The French Revolution, there was the motto, liberté, fraternité, égalité, freedom, fraternity, and equality. And I think that the three things goes together very well together. I mean, because freedom is essentially important, but freedom is very difficult to realize without equality. I mean, if you have a society in which people are different, someone is more equal than other, it's clear that freedom is restricted only to a few people. On the other hand, and therefore the ideal of universal freedom is something that is not reached. And of course, it is not easy to reach this equality, this kind of equality, the equality which our Italian Constitution is speaking, equality beyond the right, equality to reach to have the equal possibility of developing and their own personality. And this can be done only if we add to these two the idea of fraternity. Fraternity is essentially important, extremely important things, because without fraternity, we cannot in reality having equality, and without equality, we cannot have freedom. So I think that I'm stressing the idea of fraternity also because I have just signed a declaration with a 30 Nobel Prize, 30 Nobel Laureate in peace at Vatican on the need of universal fraternity. And this universal fraternity is extremely important in our world, also to reach peace, to fight against climate change. So I was very lucky that in my particular case, I enjoyed enough freedom. I enjoyed a lot of academic freedom, in the sense that no one taught me what I have to do. I was more or less free in doing my work. And of course, when I was at Laboratory of Frascati, it was assumed that I have to spend some time to do things that were interesting for the labs, but that was quite natural. Otherwise, it would be useless to stay at this particular place. And also in my life. So I think that freedom is something that was important in my life, and is something that we have to defend, because it's not for granted that people in the next years will have freedom. So it's something. So our constitution is very nice. It's a beautiful constitution. But I think that we have not to take for granted that things have to be modified. So I think that on the other hand, freedom is fundamental in order to have the people have the possibility to fulfill their aims, to feel his own life of what they should like. So I think that is extremely important things, and I was very happy to have enjoyed it in my life. And I hope that this could be extended in all parts of the world and also to future generations, but that is not easy. Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Professor Parisi. We're here to discuss also about your book, the book you recently written and been translated to German. The Italian title is In un volo di storni, in a flight of starlings in English. And in your book, you often discuss about ideas meant as creative thinking. And this is very important behind many of your works, the idea of the possibility of coming up with new ideas. Now, of course, as scientists, we need to have the tools of the trade. You need to know mathematics, you need to know physics, but that doesn't bring alone an idea. And so I want to ask you a question, the very same question I was asked by a group of neuroscientists, and that actually put me in a tight spot, because it's a really tough question, which took me quite some time to answer. So here is the question. What is the genesis of an idea? How is an idea born?
Well, this is something that is not easy to understand. My impression, I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, as you know, and that a lot of work for the genesis of new idea is something unconscious. And that is well known in many different fields that are different for science. For example, one thing that is quite important for people that are doing music is, I mean, very often, at least, music is centered around a theme. When you have to write a musical piece, you have to find some theme, and after this theme is elaborated and so on. So So, for example, and that is very important. And also, if we speak with a professional musicians, the people that do music, they say that typically the theme, the idea of the new theme comes to the mind from nowhere. I mean, they are just thinking. And this is something that is quite common in many other things. For example, very often people that are doing poetry also they get some ideas, some inspiration for new poetry. And this is a lot of unconscious work. And also, for example, I was discussing with people that are doing architecture in Italy. And he was saying that that very often he say what is that he stays in the bed just after that is awakened in the early hours of the day before breakfast, and start to put ideas together, to put the thought together, and in that situation he has new ideas. So I think that it's something that, of course, sometimes you have to reflect. I mean, the fact that you're not, I mean, getting new ideas is not that you are idle. You start to reflect on something, you have a very long reflections, conscious reflection on a given argument, you start to look to that argument from different viewpoints. And what happens, I think, is that at that moment you have, I mean, this conscious work try to put movement as unconscious, and at that moment you get some ideas. But for example, the new ideas may be stimulated from something outside. For example, something that happened to me more than once, also to some friend of mine, that they have people, sometimes people ask you why you cannot do something, and discussing with them why you cannot do something, you find the answer how you can do. So it's something that comes from discussion, it comes from somewhere, and it's something like dreams. For example, it's very well known the case of a famous chemistry, Kekulé, that was having the task of finding a new formula from a new chemical compound. Nobody had the idea how to do, and they had a dream during the night, and the dream suggested to him how to do. So sometimes the dreams that gives us ideas.
Thank you. That's very interesting, and I think we should all try hard and dream tonight and get some good ideas.
Yes. Yes.
Another aspect that you reiterate several times during the story of your scientific experience is that in order to open a new road, a new research path, there was then the need to develop new mathematical tools or tools suitable for solving a certain problem. Developing all these tools costs an incredible amount of work, which is even harder when you're not sure if it's worth the effort. In the book, you state, in physics and mathematics, the disproportion between the effort to understand something new for the first time and the simplicity and naturalness of the result once the various passages have been completed is striking. In the finished product, you say in the book, in science as in poetry, there is no trace of the fatigue of the creative process and the doubts and hesitation that accompany it. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. The point is the following, that when you write something in physics and mathematics, you want that the reader understands better the argument. And of course, and usually people do not write, well, I started this, but this does not work. After I tried this one, this was working a little better. After I finally got to the idea of doing that. That was nearly perfect, but there was some problem, and I finally have these things. Of course, this is something that maybe is useful to the reader, because the reader will really appreciate how the things have been done, and sometimes one have a sequence of definitions so on, and one does not grasp why people is doing that. But this is not usually done in papers that are published. Of course, if you write your biography, or you write and you give a lecture on the argument, or you write an informal, something that is informal, you give this type of information. But this information is something that is usually not written in the book. And that is from some sense is a pity. But as you want, this is typical also of people that are doing poetry. For example, I remember that Oscar Wilde was saying to a letter to some friend of him, I believe. He said, "I'm writing a poetry. This morning I added a comma. After reflection, this afternoon I canceled the comma." So it's clear that all of this doubt about comma and so on is something of having or not having a comma, and you can imagine also all doubt and so on the rest. It's something that people does not see, because it does not see the many versions of the poems. Of course, there are some other people that poets that write the poems just without directly, or people that write a novel without adding just publishes the first version of the novel. But usually there is a lot of reflection, a lot of work, especially in science. One is trying to polish and to simplify all the proof and so on. And that is because also sometimes the proof that one is presented are very involved. So I think so this is something that happens many times. And also because it's clear that sometimes the argument involved that one is making a long argument while it can be much shorter. And indeed, this was clearly also, I think, to Voltaire. Voltaire, I wrote to someone, "Please excuse me for writing a long letter, but I had no time to write a short one." And now the point is that this seems somewhat strange, but the point is that conciseness is something that's not easy to reach without losing some information, because if we want to be concise and put everything together, this takes a lot of time. And so also scientists, which have some time to do, try to write short paper, but this takes a lot of time.
So next book, we have to expect a poetry book.
Pardon?
Next book we expect from you will be a poetry book.
Well, not at all good in poems. That you can forget. Never, I will not do.
Very well, Professor Parisi, before I go to the next question, let me remind the public that, you are welcome and encouraged to come up with your questions. My next question is obviously related to the previous one, and about ideas. Us physicists, like to think of ourselves as intelligent. And by that, I mean able to read through the lines, because that's what intelligent comes from intelligere. Now, this is because we are trained, and we train our students to take a complex problem, to make into smaller parts, to see what are general trends, and to translate all of this into mathematical expressions. And so, you know, for many years, we thought we were intelligent. But right now, we're not the only ones with such a property. As you are aware, there is artificial intelligence that is able or promises to be able to do just as well as we do. So here is my question. What is your attitude towards AI? And are you worried about it as many of the world experts on AI are?
Well, the question is the few aspects. One of the things that I think that is crucial, that artificial intelligence, as many other tools, has to be regulated. It means it's clearly that anything that gives some kind of power on to men need some type of regulations. For example, we know that the press was invented 5 centuries ago, more or less, and the press is regulated. We have a lot of regulation on press, we have a lot of regulations on freedom on press and so on, but we have also some other regulations. So, for example, the fact of the right of the author and so on. So anything that is going to increase our capability has to be regulated. And now it's clear that there is a certain amount of things that have to be regulated on artificial intelligence. The problem that it should be not intrusive of our privacy. The fact that there should be some way in which one should be able to have some signature of the image or other or movies that are done by artificial intelligence. This was a problem of, I mean, you know that people can do deep fakes in which images that are not true, in which you can have some, or also movies where you can have some person that is going to speak and so on. Now, up to some time ago, an image, a photograph was supposed to be some kind of proof, but it's clear that if we start to have a photograph that are generated with artificial intelligence, a photograph is no more a proof. Okay, but we have started to see in these days. We know a lot of images that were going to prove that someone was in some place where something that were produced by Photoshop. Therefore, we started to have more and more tools to generate images that are not true. And that is an old history. I mean, I remember that where some 1 century ago, Stalin changed some photograph in which there was a Trotsky in some particular occasion, and they produced a new version of the image without the Trotsky. And that was done without artificial intelligence. It was done by hand and by handwriting, done by men. So it's clear that we should try to have some signature, for example, of image that are generated by artificial intelligence, that this signature should not be cancelled, and so on, because we want to understand which image are generated by artificial intelligence and which image are not generated by artificial intelligence correspond to photogram, to video. That is something that I think is absolutely needed. The other thing that is quite important is the problem of autonomous lethal weapon. I mean, we may have a weapon, I mean, a system that are able to kill people that are autonomous, and they have a lethal because they can kill people. And this is something that has to be regulated, because it would be extremely dangerous to have the possibility of fighting a war with some kind of artificial intelligent weapon system that may kill people. Already this happens, and this is something that has been too regulated, because I think that is important from the viewpoint of ethics, that any decision to kill someone, which is a terrible decision, it should be taken by human man, by a human person, and not by an algorithm and by artificial intelligence. The distinction between somebody that is a target because a military, and distinction between a civilian is something that should have been approved by human beings. It's a problem of accountability, and I think that the death of human being is something that should have someone accountable, if this is done according to the law of war or not, and not just an artificial intelligence. So we have a lot of problems of this type. On the other hand, I think that what we see these days is more or less the continuation of what we have seen in the past. I mean, for example, we started to have in physics, in mathematics, 30 years ago, very, very powerful system that are able to do algebra, long algebra computation. Computation involved millions and millions of terms, can be done nowadays from 30 years from now, can be done by dedicated system. So this is something that we already seen, that some part of our activity are devolved to artificial intelligence. Other fields which one finds very useful in artificial intelligence, which is already being used, is a capability of understanding human language and translating it. We know that they are already on mobile phone software we translate from one language to another language. We understand the spoken language and translate another spoken language, and so on. There's all this It's clearly that we have, from this kind of viewpoint, we have all social problems. With social problems because human productivity is going to increase. But the fact that human productivity is going to increase, this we have on our front of us two roads: or decrease the number of jobs because the productivity of each job is increasing, or decreasing the hour that everybody is going to work, and this keeps the total number of jobs constant. And this is something that we have to decide, and that is something that already in the past we have seen. People, the total number of jobs in Italy was, I think, just after the war, 48 hours per week. Now, typical contract is decreased to 40. So therefore, it's clear that we have to think in a different way in order to meet the challenges that are given by artificial intelligence. But as far as the things that the question that was said, well, it depends from, I think that it depends from the definition of intelligence. The point is there have been a lot of things that we do, that we discover that are somewhat repetitive, that artificial intelligence is going to free from doing. And I think that it will take a lot of time before we go or arrive to a situation in which artificial intelligence is going to do some kind of intelligent things without our help. I mean, if just I think to create the problem of creating a new physical theory, to create a new mathematical, deep mathematical theorem, I don't think that in a short amount of time, and maybe in even a long amount of time, this type of artificial intelligence model is something that are going to solve the problem. Indeed, you see the one problem on which one sees the limit of artificial intelligence is, for example, driving. We know that people have said that autonomous driving of car is something that will become very fast. It was waited for 3 years ago, but things are going very slow. The problem that the things that we have seen, the ChatGPT and so on, that there are these language models that works very well, but they are some kind of language models, and as far as I don't know, it does not correspond to having something that have a real representation of the world how we have in our brain. And I think that the problem is really to arrive to something which have a representation of the world, which is of the outside reality, and is not only able to play with words. Of course, playing with words without understanding is something that can be done, and it has been done. But I think that we have long time before we arrive to something which is an understanding of the reality, and also if we arrive to something which understanding of reality is something for which I'm absolutely not scared. But I think that we absolutely need to regulate these kind of things.
Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Alberica.
Now, after all this machine learning, let's come to the role of teachers, but natural teachers. In your book, you mentioned several times Nicola Cabibbo, Iona Lasigno, many other people with whom there was the relation between teacher and student, but also of collaborator, and finally also a friendship. Since tomorrow we will be in a university, Goethe University of Frankfurt, let me ask you, Professor Parisi, how important is it to meet the right person, the right teacher?
I think that the right teacher is essential because there are many things that the right teacher can give you. For example, the things that make it stimulate your curiosity. I know many people that, for example, found that a good teacher mathematics at Scuola Media, means the first 3 years after the primary school, but after at the higher school, they did not have a good teacher mathematics, and they were not able to understand the mathematics. On the other hand, the people had not, at a lower level, did not have a good teacher mathematics and learn mathematics with a good teacher. So the good teacher is something that is extremely important. It is extremely important in this kind of school because it has to, first of all, there should have there should be some empathy between you and the teacher. This is something, and therefore what is important that is we have a teacher that is able to have some empathy with the student, transmit some kind of empathy, and also that it makes the people have curiosity. The point is the following, that human beings are driven by curiosity. All curiosity is fundamental being fundamental is on humanity. And if you look to small children, you can see the amount of curiosity that these children have. Children are curious of the certain world just the first day that they are born. They start to learn to move themselves and so on, just because they're curious. So the curiosity is a fundamental thing in human being. And it's clear that you have to have a kind of teaching that is going to, that is fundamental to push the curiosity of people for the things that they are going to study. Because if they don't push curiosity, everything is going to become boring. Also, to university teachers are important in order to have people to understand the method in which you have to follow at university, to understand the ethical research, the integrity in research, and also to teach a lot of technical things that usually you don't find in the books.
Thank you. So let me go back to your past, the early part of your career. Well, in the book, I enjoyed reading about the early stages of your career, in particular that of a theoretical physicist in the 60s in Rome, Sapienza, and how much enthusiasm there was about new things that were coming out, the rapidity with which new ideas were booming, and how much, open roads you were able to pursue at that time. Now, imagine being yourself a student, a physics student in theoretical physics in 2023. What would you find exciting at this time? And what's your time?
Well, the point, I think that there are so many things in physics in this time that we do not understand. And there are many, many problems open. Let's say one problem is what happens in the very, very small part of the physics. We think that we understand the physics at the microscopic scale, and we understand what the proton had done. The proton is done by quarks that are taken together by gluons. But we more or less have some understanding of that, but however, we have a lot of work to do in order to be sure that our present understanding is the correct one. But however, if we try to, there are some kind of questions that we do not understand for the moment. For example, we do not understand why we do see experimentally 6 quarks, why we see this type of quarks, why 6, why the masses of the quarks are just the ones that we see. So we have a lot of questions that we do not understand. We have a theory that describe the result, but we do not understand why this theory is correct, therefore we could try to ask, for example, question what quarks are done of. We do not understand, for example, gravity. We do not understand quantum gravity. We do not have any theory of quantum gravity that we can argue that is consistent in a serious way, that is going to describe the natural world. These are different. Many of these questions are questions that are very, very difficult. And some of them we can think that we have progresses in the next years. Someone who maybe will not have will not have the answer in this century. So we really do not know what will happen in the future. So however, this is certainly a fascinating question. And of course, we have also the other, from the other side, we have questions in what happens in the universe on land scale, what happens at the universe in some regions where they are to be seen. For example, we have seen all the progress that has been done on the gravitational waves. We were able to see black holes, but we have to understand more the property of black holes. And for these things, we have, for example, the Einstein telescope that have been projected by Europe, and maybe it will come to Italy in Sardinia. And the other thing that we have the problem of more complex, very complex situation. For example, we have system, we have a lot of complex system which we do not understand. We do not have the tool to study them, and we have a lot of problem in the statistical, in the study of material, study of superconductivity, studying of material, special materials, and that there are many types of systems. And I don't think that, I mean, the future, one characteristic of the future that is extremely difficult to predict. And we can, I think that the best that we can do is to understand the present. Also to understand the present is extremely difficult. And predicting the future is more and more difficult. So I think that the best suggestion that I can do to somebody is to be open to these problems that one can study, to try to understand which are the different options, because also the options that one has, depending on the place that one is, the type of teacher that one has, and also try to understand, to see what, to understand his own abilities, his own capabilities, and after that, try to do the things that he find more tuned, more able to do. And I don't think that one can give a suggestion, study that, study this, and so on, because it's very difficult to understand which are the field in which one is going to do more progress in the last, the new 50 years. And indeed, if people asked the people 50 years ago, I don't know if people have answered to this question. Typically, the answer, most of the case will be not correct.
Thank you. So you wouldn't have any problem being excited even in 2023 by theoretical physics. Alberica.
Professor Parisi, the book In a Flight of Starlings ends with the irreverent and captivating quote by Richard Feynman, "Physics is like sex. Sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it." Luciano, you have 3 kids, so you know very well what that means. Me too, by the way. So, Professor Parisi, how did you fall in love with physics many years ago? And how do you continue to love it after so many years?
Well, the things that was very, first of all, what happened to me that up to the moment where I have to decide to go to university, I really am not, I mean, up to 18 years, because I finished got my high school degree 18 years, I not decided in advance what I should do. Because I was living more or less in the present. The university was a future. It was some kind of future that I have to decide, but I am not to decide up to the last moment. In some sense, I am a procrastinator. And I think that one should not postpone to tomorrow what can be postponed to the day after tomorrow. So anyhow, I just at the last moment I start to think seriously what I should do. I was very good in mathematics. I enjoyed mathematics from when I was a child, and I was interested in scientific book, and therefore I tried to decide what I should do. My parents were supposing that I was doing engineering, but I had the feeling that engineering was somewhat boring, so I had to discuss physics and mathematics. So I reflected for some time, and after some reflections, I decided for physics. I mean, I am not tracked do not remember exactly what decided me for physics. Just thinking after many years, I have the feeling that the reason for which I decided physics was that I knew what was what's the kind of a subject that were in physics, what was the physics of the 20th century, while at that moment I had no idea what was the mathematics of the 20th century. So mathematics was something that was more or less unknown to me, what one should do after doing what mathematicians do, while it was much more clear to me what physicists are doing. And I think that that's the reason that I was doing physics. And of course, I found myself well because the things that were in physics were very interested. I was also studying a little amount of mathematics. I mean, for people doing theoretical physics, at that time, I knew much more mathematics than the usual people doing theoretical physics. So that I kept somewhat of my interest in mathematics. And the point is that the interest in physics comes from curiosity, because it's just you see some problems that you are not able to solve and you are curious about that and you try to solve. And of course, that is something that is going on also now these days.
Thank you. Professor Parisi, I will ask you a question that I often discuss with my colleagues, students, and postdocs. And I know that the question I will ask is intrinsically ill-defined or not very sharply defined. The question is the following. I will first make a qualification about what I mean by fundamental and non-fundamental questions, and then I will ask you the question. So let's say that there are questions that are fundamental in the sense that they address things that we have really no idea about. Like, for instance, what is at the center of a black hole, or what is a quantum theory of gravity. And other things which have questions which are not fundamental, like what are the properties of a specific but complex alloy, or what is a structure that produces stars when a cloud collapses. So having done this preface, the question is, do you think the number of fundamental questions is finite or not?
Oh, that is a very, finite now these days, or finite for the whole history of
in general, that no matter how advanced our civilization will be, at one point it will have addressed all of the fundamental questions.
Well, my feeling is not, because of the fact that we see that increasing the time, I would say the number of fundamental questions is going to increase and not to decrease. I mean, if we have to judge from the history of the past, I think that the number of fundamental questions always increased. I think that was someone that was saying at the end of the 18th century that everything was more or less understood, and one has only to understand a little better how matter was done. But I think that the point is, for example, I mean, we had discovered 1 century ago galaxy. And before the discovery of, galaxies have been seen from a lot of time, but the problem that people did not realize, were not sure the galaxies were done by stars. And it's clear that after that we started to do galaxies, we have a lot of questions that we have about galaxies. For example, we discovered the black hole inside the center of the galaxy and so on. So I think that more we go into the direction, I think that we'll have a lot of many other fundamental questions. Maybe possible that a certain amount, a certain situation, there will be some fundamental question. We have answered our fundamental question. I would think that unlikely, because also some questions may become so difficult that we are not able to solve. And you see, without not being able to solve this fundamental question, we do not we are not able to see if there are other fundamental questions to be solved. For example, at that moment, we had the fundamental questions was what the proton have done. After we answered this fundamental question, the proton are done by quark or gluon. We had the fundamental question that what the quark or gluon are done with, and therefore we have some level of deeper object. Now it's clear that maybe we are going to be able to construct some kind of theory, but at a deeper level. But if this theory at deeper level will be enough or not, is something, it will be finite. So I really do not know, because the point is that this really depends how the universe is being constructed, and if the universe has finite and not finite number of questions. I think that if someone would ask me, I would have suggested to build a universe with an infinite number of fundamental questions. But the point is that no one consulted me at that time. So really I cannot say anything precise on that.
Well, maybe in another universe, in another life, someone will ask you. I have somewhat different views. I think fundamental questions are not fractal, in the sense that at one point you reach a threshold below which there isn't really anything else you have to ask. There are many questions, and those probably have a fractal nature, but the fundamental ones, the ones that really set the skeleton of our understanding, those are probably finite. Alberica, do you want to ask another question?
Yes, I used my role of interviewer to ask for the entanglement between theoretical and experimental approach that you often come back in your book. This is a discussion that has been running also through all science for many years, with the attempt of keeping the two dimensions together. Professor Parisi, you are a theoretical physicist, but you many times always say that you really like to experiment, to experience things practically, to involve in experiments yourself. Can you tell us an experiment which you have participated with, and what is your favorite experiment of nowadays? Well,
look, I think that doing involved in some experiment is something that is useful also for people that are doing theory, also because it's something you are learning a lot of things in doing an experiment. And I think that most, for example, I was working on some experiment on superconductors when I was very young. But I was involved also in experiment on collisions in particle physics. I mean, however, the two long project which I worked on was the Apple computer, that was a construction of a computer that was, for a certain moment, the fastest computer in the world. And that was something that was very interesting. I consider this to be an experiment because it's some kind of practical experimental things. You have something in front of you, you must beat it, you must solve something, you must construct something that is working, some computers that really do computation. And this is something this was something quite useful, because also in doing this job, I have learned many things about the computers, about and computer science and so on. The other project that I found quite interesting was the project about Starling. The project about Starling, which I speak in the book, was that we've seen this fascinating project, these fascinating shapes that Starling flocks produce in the Roman sky. And we wanted to understand which was the three-dimensional structure, how fast they're going, how they were communicating, how they were changing the speed, and so on. And this was something fascinating, and we have to, in this case, really construct some experimental apparatus and taking data and analyze the data. This was a project that was very interesting both for the type of results that we obtain on Starlings, on the movement of Starling, but also interesting because I think that is something that I think that it's good for theoreticians to do this kind of things. For example, I remember in a completely different field that there was some well, I don't remember the name, a biologist that was saying in a book that was writing that he was usually doing an experiment in his lab in California, but every year for 2-3 months in the summertime, he was going on the field and was taking data, to do observations in the field. He was looking to the behavior of some monkey. And because he was saying that to have some taking data in the field is something that a biologist has to do from time to time to keep to doing things good also in the lab. So I think that maybe what these two experiments, let's say the Apple computer and the Starling, are the ones that I like more and for which I spend a lot of time in doing that.
Okay, I think thank you for these replies. We should really try and have some questions from the public. There are many which we have received so far, and we're trying to select a few. Maybe I will start with the first one. It's from Flavio Murolo and says, I fully share the need to regulate technology, which can give a strong advantage and lead to dangerous scenarios of domination. Nevertheless, in the race towards new technologies or weapons, if one group reaches a certain level of power before it can be balanced by others, only their integrity and moral would not allow them to exploit it to their exclusive advantage. Do you think that today the countries who are most likely to reach a strong level of power in AI have sufficient moral integrity to self-regulate themselves?
Well, that is a difficult question. It's clear that we belong to some of the countries, or if we want, of the bloc that have more capabilities in artificial intelligence. And I think that it's our duty to convince our government to do this type of regulations. And also is something that one has not to underestimate the capability of the others. For example, if you think of the atomic bomb was done by the Americans in 1945 and by the Russians 4 years later. But at the moment they did the nuclear bomb, the hydrogen bomb, the hydrogen bomb of the United States was done a few months of difference with the done of the Soviet Union. So I think that to go on in one direction without reaching agreement with the other is some kind of short-sighted politics, because others may do do some great advantage that you don't know about, and therefore after you find in a difficult situation to discuss with them. And it's clearly that that is something that, and indeed we know that in a certain period the United States was behind the Soviet Union in the development of nuclear atoms, nuclear bombs, and so on. So it's clearly that it would be extremely important for people also for their own future, not only for moral argument, to reach type of discussion with all type of people, all type of countries that may go on in this direction.
Okay, Alberica.
There is a question that I hope will stimulate all the young people that I hope are listening or will be listening the recorded version of the webinar. And it is physics and mathematics are always often seen by students as difficult, even too difficult. Sometimes students are almost scared to approach such subjects. What should be done in the schools and in communication in general to approach students to these subjects, to show the charm of physics instead of only the difficulties?
Well, this is a difficult question, because it's clear that this is something that's not easy to communicate. But for example, for mathematics, I know that there is a lot of things that have been done in the past, which have been nearly totally forgotten. One approach was called intuitive geometry intuitiva in Italian, and that was pushed by many people, and was pushed also by an Italian mathematician, Emma Castelnuovo. For example, in the medium school and scuole medie, that in the middle between primary school and high school, she was explaining a lot of mathematics, a lot of algebra using geometry. And geometry was explained in cutting paper and gluing paper together. So you have all these kind of things that, therefore, the way that was using to reach mathematics was something that was done with the hands on the people. And the things, this is something that is quite important also for physics. There is a movement in France, man dalla patte means dalla pasta means to try to have people that do things with their hands. And now it's clear that this is extremely important. Therefore, one is for far as physics is concerned, one has to remember that physics is an experimental science, and physics was born to us to explain experiments and so on. So it will be extremely important that people have the possibility in their school not only to see experiments, which is extremely unlikely to happen in most of the Italian schools, but also to do experiments by themselves, to put in some situation in which they can try to find some kind of law that describes the experiments that they are doing. So I think that there is we need something which is something more action from the student is needed than the type of teaching that is quite abstract. And therefore, we need some participation in school, some way to go to the abstract starting from concrete. Of course, it's something that is not easy to do, but we need a strong reflection on this, because it would be really a pity, as you say, that many people consider mathematics as such a boring things that is not worthwhile to study. Of course, having not found mathematics boring, it's difficult for me to give a good suggestion how to make mathematics not boring. But I think that there are a lot of people that have done reflection on these things, and ask people to, and more or less we have first all to try to implement the suggestion and also to find a new one.
Thank you. I'm trying to
goes in this direction. Sorry, Luciano.
Yeah. I'm trying to filter among the many questions. Maybe I will sacrifice a bit of a few of them on artificial intelligence, which is very popular, several questions on that. And concentrate on one question that we don't know who wrote this, but is about the, when theoretical physics goes beyond the realm of physics. And in particular, I'm trying to summarize a very long question, whether or not it is useful to do theoretical physics without having experimental guidance or support, as it is the case, for instance, for multiverse theory or pre-Big Bang cosmology and so on.
Well, I think that sometimes it's useful. And for example, when Einstein started to work on the gravitational on gravity theory, it was not clear which was the experimental support of the new theory. Of course, one could say that, for example, there are maybe some experiments that have been done by that time that could go in that direction, but Einstein never mentioned in his notes that he knew this type of experiment. And also for development of relativity, it was a very little experimental support from the viewpoint of Einstein. So sometimes, but of course in this case, it was Einstein that was a very smart guy that succeeded to do. So it's clearly that if you want to develop something without a direct experimental support, is something that is very difficult unless you have one has intelligence. Einstein, of course, the intelligence of Einstein may be not concentrated only in one given person, but may be concentrated in many different persons. So it's clearly that this is something that is worthwhile. And also I would say that doing something that is quite in this direction, like string theory, I think that we have learned many things, many mathematical structure, many things of the theory, and I think that any time that you discover something new, it is something that is extremely important. And also, if this will not be used at that time, but it will be used in other situation. For example, I think that supersymmetry was something that was invented to explain particle physics. The wave is not clear if the wave, supersymmetry theory is relevant for the wave, but there have been a lot of application of supersymmetry idea in many other different fields of physics.
Very good. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Oliver Gunther asked, when you work on complex system question, do you think it works better to try to generalize the problem to many application area, like social science, physics, biology, and so on and so forth, or to focus on the field where the question originated?
Well, it depends. It strongly depends. In certain cases, it's useful to generalize because you have reached an understanding which is useful to generalize. The point is that if we do not have enough understanding, I don't think it's not useful to generalize because you have nothing to generalize. So it's clearly that, well, and also, I mean, anyhow, this type of statement may be not so useful because you may imagine that you have some idea that cannot be deep. You cannot arrive to understanding because you need you don't have experimental data, and also generalize another field. You can find a field where you have experimental data. I think that the point is that you really don't know what is useful, and you have really to try. Of course, what happens that a good scientist, although they do not have enough information, they understand in an intuitive way which is the right things to be done. But generally speaking, it's something that cannot be difficult to say in advance. And I like very much a book of a philosopher, Feyerabend, a German philosopher who written a book against method, in which he says that he proves, from my viewpoint, that Galileo was not using the scientific method to doing his discoveries. And his thesis is that if Galileo would have followed the scientific method, as now think of the scientific method, will never arrive to the discoveries. So it's difficult to say it's better to do that, it's better to do that other. You try something and you follow the thing that works.
Okay. Thank you. I think while we are very excited and taken by your answers, and it's probably time to close it here. We are all tired and dinner is calling. So I would like to leave the closing remarks to Dr. Santoriello. Michele.
Thank you, Professor Parisi, for being here tonight and for this evening so full of suggestions and personal and research experiences. I go to my question. Humanity must make essential choices, must forcefully counter climate change. Thus begins the speech delivered by the Nobel Prize for Physics, Giorgio Parisi, on the 8th of October 2021, in the Chamber of Deputies. A clear and powerful start that admits no mistakes, but which, above all, doesn't admit inertia. How is the climate a complex system? What are our responsibilities and duties as a society towards future generations?
Well, our duties and responsibility toward the future generation is to do the best that we can do, to take the problem of climate change seriously, to understand, really to understand what happens if we are doing something and what happens if we are not doing. And the things that is extremely important is to realize that this is a task that have to be done by the whole humanity. It cannot be done in half of the world, and the other half of the world that is not done. And in order to convince the majority of people to move in this direction, it is crucial, I believe, that the weight of the type of things that have to be done is divided between all people. And it's clear that this is crucial. I mean, we have seen that when it was the conference COP22 in Glasgow, that China and India were agreed to arrive to zero emissions in 2060, while other countries arrive 2050. And it's clear that this type of measure is going to damage the economy of some country and favor the economy of the other one. And if we do not have a huge system of compensation between different countries, it's something that does not work. So let me just come to the first thing that was one of the first things that was saying, fraternity. It thinks that without fraternity among people in the same country, among people among different countries, we cannot really arrive to stop global warming. And this is and fraternity is something that is difficult to reach. But these are things that developing fraternity is probably the most important things that we have to do.
Thank you, Professor Parisi. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Parisi for this interesting and stimulating conversation. And also the two moderators of the evening, Professor Luciano Rezzolla and Alberica Toia. Additional thanks go to the colleagues of GSI in Darmstadt, in particular to Professor Silvia Masciocchi for the technical support of the evening and the contribution to this inaugural evening of a science festival. Thank you very much indeed to all. I would also like to invite the public to the next event in presence and free access tomorrow evening at 5:45 p.m. at Campus Riedberger of the Goethe University with the
I think we have lost Michele, but he was just inviting everybody to come to the physics department tomorrow evening for the Lectio Magistralis of Professor Amendola about the new book he has written on the algorithm of the world. And with this, again, thank you, Professor Parisi, and we see you in person in flesh and blood tomorrow evening. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.